This is what happened over the course of the weekend, where a bunch of teenagers, it looks like, difficult to say exactly who they all are, but they're basically just what we used to call steaming, as they did on the tubes years ago, into shops, smashing them up, stealing stuff, taking it outside, sort of basically dividing the spoils between them, running in and out of shops. The police seemingly completely and utterly incapable, really, of stopping it. This is something that started happening in Los Angeles, where they started just literally looting stores, running into department stores kind of en masse. And they've worked out there's not very much that anybody can do. I know the Apple store, which is in Regent Street, has now sort of basically started hiding the most expensive pieces of equipment so that they can't be stolen. But we have this kind of, and it looks dreadful. You know, you might argue that nobody's actually being hurt here, but if you were there with your kids and your family, you would be feeling pretty intimidated, I would imagine, wouldn't you, Ella?
It's terrible antisocial behaviour. I mean, you know, OK, like you say, people might make the argument and say, well, there's a few tears I'd shed for the likes of Apple. But it's actually not really about the harm that's being done to these businesses or anything. This was kind of a similar argument was that people like me and others were making at the time of the London riots a few years ago, which is that for these kids, and they do, you know, you watch the video and a lot of them do look very young. They're kind of teenagers who either should know better or should have someone kind of cuff their ear and tell them better. Is, you know, what kind of lesson in life is this teaching them if they're allowed to carry on with this kind of antisocial behaviour? I think probably part of it is, I think, you know, not to link everything to lockdowns, but I think one of the legacies of lockdowns is that if you have a prolonged period of enforced antisocial behaviour where, you know, people aren't interacting with each other, and the idea of, you know, all these trends that are happening in society at the moment, the idea of intergenerational interaction is kind of no longer, the idea that you might talk to each other on the street, you know, communities not really forming anymore. You know, when I remember when I was young playing out on the estate that we grew up in, you know, windows would be open, and if someone heard you swear or something while you were playing, you'd get told off by someone's mum, or you kind of would have that sense of a neighbourhood being involved in each other's lives in a positive way. And all of that has become degraded, even to the extent at which you have young men and women or young kids literally kind of playing games at looting in the most obvious and public shops in the capital city, and neither anyone nor even the police really doing anything. And I think that probably tells you something about the state of social interaction at the moment. You know, what is going on that people are too afraid to grab a kid that's behaving in that kind of a way and cuff them and actually protect them from themselves and say to them, if you carry on with this kind of behaviour, it's the only route to you is to behind bars, and that would be a terrible tragedy. Yeah, because people on the left always say, oh, you know, it's because they haven't got enough things to do, you should have more youth clubs, and somehow the schools should be better at teaching these kids values, and surely it's an awful lot about the parents, isn't it? I think it's a bit of both. It's a bit of everything, which is that I don't buy this idea that we've just simply got the problem is there's a lot of kind of anti-working class sentiment around this discussion, which is either that you get a kind of patronising view from sort of liberal lefties, which says, oh, you know, these people can't really help it. They're so poor that all they're reduced to is looting JD Sports. And I mean, you know, but we've had working class people have gone through periods of extreme poverty in the past, and this whole kind of idea of looting and stuff is a very modern phenomenon, actually. So that's, and you know, when I was young, it certainly wouldn't have been tolerated. And I'm not that old, Mike, by the way. So this I would never have suggested such a thing. It's a kind of a contemporary thing that's happening. But then you also have, I'm afraid, from right wingers, this kind of idea that it's just a kind of feckless inadequacy of the lower orders in which they can't control their kids. I think what's happened, actually, the most poisonous trend of, and I'm sounding very down on modern times, but the most poisonous trend of the contemporary moment is this lack of authority, is this idea that both parents and community leaders and teachers and, you know, anyone has a kind of doubts their authority to be able to socialise young people. Yes. And I think that's probably, it's you know, I'm just about to become a parent myself, and I can tell you there'll be no hesitation of me cuffing my kids. Quite right too. Well said. Very well said. But I think it's a fear that parents have, that they will be, you know, that if they come out and kind of say what they think, that they'll be questioned or judged.